Hello and welcome once again to episode 119 of Code Completion. We are a group of iOS developers and educators hoping to share what we love most about development, Apple technology, and completing your code. My name is Dimitri and I'll be your host once again for this episode, and I'm joined today by my fellow completionist, Spencer.
Hey there.
So every time we start a new episode, we get into the same rigmarole of why does Mastodon not have Quote Toots? And that is because I want to say to the world that this episode is going live. But in order to do that, I want to quote tweet my last post that said we're going to be live, so that way there's context and there's a link, and it all makes sense. And I guess this gets into the history of Quote Tweets in general, because they started off being this super janky way of posting someone else's content in which they would just copy paste the tweet and put RT in front of it as if they're retweeting, and optionally also add context in the same go. So all of that kind of is not great, but that's the model that TikTok and Instagram still have. So I guess nothing changes. But what Twitter quickly changed towards was, when you want to quote tweet something, you copy the link to that tweet, and then you also add your context, and then that became more of an official button that you can go ahead and do stuff. And people have been wondering, well, Mastodon has been available for what feels like a decade, just growing in the background. I think it's less than that by a long shot, but over the past few years, there have been many debates as far as hey, what kind of quote tweeting support is Mastodon going to support? And for the most part, it has been something that the developers of Mastodon, and I mean the server developers of Mastodon, didn't want to add, because quote tweeting along with it came significant hatred towards other people, because Twitter is a wonderful place. And Mastodon did not want to follow down those footsteps. So they didn't want to give a very easy way of shifting an entire audience on someone who didn't deserve it. Right or wrong, whatever they posted, they were expecting it to be seen by their smaller audience. And I say that with a loose asterisk, because we all know that everyone wants to be super famous. And I'm just kidding there. But I would say probably a lot of people do post on social media with the goal of becoming large and getting notorious, and they love the fact that they all of a sudden get all the attention in the world and then quickly regret it. But that isn't everyone, and Mastodon is trying to be that safe place for everyone. So that's why it didn't get it up until then. That said, there was a ton of PRs and issues that were tracking specifically the ability to quote boost, and it seems like it may take the form of a reply and boost, where you boost it separately and then you reply to it in one action. But there's a lot of hesitancy to just add a button that does the thing. There's a lot of consensus that if you were to post a link to a Mastodon post inside of another post, that it should render the post in line that. Everyone kind of agrees it would be a good thing, because that's the whole point of linking to another post. The part that people disagree with is having an easy button to just fling your audience on top of someone else. That said, if everyone wants this, clients are going to add support to it, and it's just going to be the same situation as Twitter. So it seems what the developers for Mastodon want to do is, instead of doing that, which wasn't great for people, to instead build this support server side, so that way there are controls per account to say, hey, do you want to be quote tooted? If you are quote tooted, do you want the resulting fanfare, or do you just want it to be completely muted and you are unaware of it? Or do you want to know that people are kind of talking about you on the side? Give the user controls, and what shape those controls might take, who knows? That's to be determined. But it seems all those issues kind of got reopened, and probably not at fault of Ivory, who posted a poll asking, like, should we just do it anyways? That was like a resounding yes. It seems like people are going to be a little bit more patient to do it more properly, rather than just like jumping all in.
Nice. That's cool that they're being, I guess, more thoughtful about it and trying to make sure that, um, like you said, the user has control and there are some sort of safeguards to say, like, yeah, just don't even let it happen, or, uh, there are sort of a few dials you can turn to make it kind of work for whoever the user is. Like for the Code Completion Twitter account, like, yeah, like we're just going to turn it on probably and just, like that's the whole point, is so
Please
that me
quote
and
toot
Dimitri.
us.
Well, yeah, that too, but like just so me and Dimitri can like retweet it, basically, quote tweet
Hmm.
it or
But
quote
Code
tweet whatever.
Completion, the account wants to be famous.
Yes, I was gonna
Incidentally, I
say
also want to be famous. So.
that's the only reason I'm doing this podcast with Dimitri. I suffer with Dimitri every week is just to be famous, and then I can
He's gonna
discard
throw
it.
me by the wayside
That's right.
immediately once he
I
reaches that famehood.
that's my only goal in life, is to blow up, man. No,
Um,
I that's a joke, just so everyone's aware.
on the topic of becoming famous, for all of those that don't know, there are a lot of services that help people move from Twitter to Mastodon, and
Hmm.
as people move over, like you are kind of encouraged to check. Sorry, you are kind of encouraged to check these services regularly, so that way you don't potentially miss any new users that moved on. Um, but the thing that is important to note is that the only reason these services work is because in your Twitter profile description you can post your Mastodon handle. So in our case, that would be at code completion at mastodon.social. So like those
Right.
two ats combined into one mega at. And that is what allows those tools to kind of detect if you're following people on Twitter if they have a Mastodon account. So if you want to like be findable and you just made a Mastodon account, go put that Mastodon account into your Twitter profile. And that way, anyone who follows you on Twitter that also uses these tools will be able to just instantly follow you on Mastodon and be happy and not realize that they weren't following Spencer, for instance. Which I
Right.
thought I was following Spencer this whole time, but apparently I wasn't. So I was a bad friend.
He
So
discarded me.
as a good friend, I told him about this superpower, and as a better friend to everyone here, I'm telling everyone here about that superpower. So go definitely check that out. So that way, as you move over to Mastodon, which I think you should. At this point, I'm not using
Yeah.
Twitter anymore. I don't think any of the iOS and Mac community is really putting all their eggs in Twitter at this point in time. And we've all kind of moved over to Mastodon. So it's a really chill place over there right now. Everyone's kind of talking and being more open to talking to people who like they're not following back and stuff like that. So yeah, give it a shot. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. I just haven't been on like social media in general lately. I think probably due to the whole Twitter saga going on, but um yeah, I mean, I've effectively stopped using Twitter. I'll check it on occasion because there are people that I follow on there that aren't on Mastodon. So I'm not posting anything, not really posting anything on Mastodon either. But I check Ivory a lot more than I do Twitter now. So I hope that there is a larger following, or like a larger kind of exodus of people from Twitter over to Mastodon, so I can just kind of only use Mastodon and just, call it good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's there. I mean, there seem to be people kind of by the day that are moving over. So I saw that maybe it was Steve Troughton Smith that just moved over. Um,
Yep.
yeah, I mean, people are doing it. So I think Mastodon had no chance before this whole thing, but now it seems like they're getting a lot of traction. And I think the cool part is, like we talked about with this whole quote toot thing, the developers are kind of rising to the occasion of making it a platform that people will want to stay on, and this isn't just like a reactionary thing to like Twitter sucking. It's like this may be the new home of many people on social media, which I think is great. So
Yep. So one more time, that site is movetodon, movetodon.org. And yeah, it just automates the whole process. Sign into Twitter, sign into Mastodon, and it gives you follow buttons. You can follow everyone in one go. Makes it super easy. And yeah, there's a ton of clients available on Mastodon. So like, pick your poison. There's one that's built entirely with SwiftUI, completely open source, called IceCubes. So if you don't like a certain part of it, you can just go in and fix it, which I think is super cool. Very cool. In line with the open source model of Mastodon itself. And they support Quote Tweets currently, with or without the server backend part.
Nice.
So if you really want Quote Toots, Quote Toots, then go to IceCubes. IceCubes will set you up.
Nice. That's very cool.
On the topic of other things that are evolving, we have Swift, who consistently is evolving. I don't know if we hit Swift 5.8 yet, or if that's like the next major revision. I know like we got a bunch of OS updates, so maybe we got Swift 5.8. I didn't really check. I've been like, it's shameful to say this, but I've been doing like web development lately, so I have not launched Xcode in a hot moment. But yeah, I look forward to jumping back into there. And I mostly look forward to doing that because there are some new additions to Swift that we can talk about. The first one is rather interesting. It's custom reflection metadata. And you might be wondering, what on earth is this? But think of it like as property wrappers for not calling those properties, but giving information about them. So for instance, you can go ahead and make a reflection metadata type that would describe which parts of a test case are testable. Right. And then you don't need to use Xcode test case, and then you don't need to name your methods test. You just have to put @test in front of all those things, and that would just work from then on. So this is a super interesting proposal. Currently, Xcode test case works because it's built on Objective-C, and Objective-C provides this functionality of being able to read all the methods and all that, which Swift does not. But custom reflection metadata will allow anyone, and library authors, whatnot, to write these own things themselves and provide not only support for testing, but maybe you want support for like automatically building like database queries or database schemas. Like that can definitely become possible now with this reflection metadata. So I'm pretty excited about this.
Yeah, it's super cool. I this is the first article that Dimitri linked. Obviously, it's the first one we're talking about. It was a lot for me. I was like, "Holy crap!" There's a lot of information here. But I think the example of the test case and being able to the proposal's long, but it talks about like you having to put the word test at the start of the test case for it to actually be testable, runnable by XCTest, is confusing and may interfere with other methods that you just like test this thing, but you don't mean it for it to be like a unit test or UI test. So having this like @test makes sense, and I think that was kind of the most concrete example that made sense to me. So I'm sure there are going to be many use cases for this, but it seems like a good kind of I guess
first step,
hole
right?
in Swift, that like is missing, where we're kind of still relying on Objective-C, and if we eventually want to get to a future of purely Swift for everything, this is a good first step. And there's also another proposal that we'll talk about that kind of gets to that future as well. So
yeah, and this is mostly important if you're running Swift not on Apple platforms, because there's no Objective-C there. So exactly. For example, on Linux, there's a hard-coded implementation that supports Xcode test case in order to be able to like do that at compile time and emit that information, so that way you can actually run tests. So this is something that would make that more of a language feature rather than a specific compiler feature for Xcode test case. This is just kind of like the, hey, this is a really obvious place where we want to use it in Swift, but you can use it in all these other situations that could be very interesting. Namely, like, I can see it even being used in things like Codable, which is also a compile time feature. It's not really a language. It's not really built on language features. It's like you could not write Codable before they added support for Codable into the language itself. And for all intents and purposes, you should have been able to do that, right? It's just a protocol. But stuff like this, like while this might not support Codable in its entirety, it starts that process of giving more rich metadata as an opt-in experience. So that way, library authors like you and me can go ahead and build these features out in the way that we see fit. And that's, right, I think, cool.
Yeah, super cool. We've got a new access control modifier, which I think is awesome. This makes total sense for package. So we're kind of in this future where Swift packages are the norm. Luckily, we're not using CocoaPods or Carthage anymore, which is fantastic. But this kind of, it walks us through this kind of an instance where you may, make, like, there's this like a game engine. So you initialize the game engine and you run the game engine. But maybe that's something that you only want to keep within the package, and the way that you would kind of interact with the package is calling a play method. Well, if it's all public, then they could just initialize the game engine and kind of start it themselves in the app, where kind of, I guess,
it's not intended to be used there, right?
Yeah, the intended way is to like use the play method. So it makes it so that we just have this like not enough granular control of access control to make something available within just a package, but not outside of the package, if that makes sense. Like, you'd have to mark something as public, and it would kind of serve both purposes, which is perhaps not what you want, because it's exposing methods or properties that you just don't want to be exposed. So this package level access control modifier kind of eliminates that problem by just making a slightly lower level, kind of weird. I guess it's higher level in some ways, because it's not on the module level; it's in a package level. But yeah, just kind of a little bit more access control.
Yep. And you might be wondering, like, why would you want to do this if you can just have it all be in one like target on your package? And the reason for that is you can actually optimize your builds to be significantly faster if you, the developer, know how to organize the code into individual modules. And a package is just a collection of targets, with each of those of which are modules. There are ways around this, which the proposal like calls out. You can use SPI, which like purposely pokes a hole for implementation purposes. There's @implementation only, which does something similar without requiring like the full import of that library. So those things are currently possible, but this gives yet another level of control, which I think will make things a lot cleaner, because then you can go ahead and separate things semantically in a way that makes sense to you, the developer, but also control like how much of that becomes public API before people start relying on it, right? Because at the end of the day, stuff is not public API, not because they're like hiding it from you. It's more because they are not sure that it's going to stay in that shape long term. And if you start relying on it, then your code is kind of hard coded to those names and those structures, and that's kind of not going to change from that point forward. Or if they do change it, then your app is going to suddenly break the next time you need to compile it. Or worse, if your app is shipping against a platform like macOS or iOS, you're not even including that code. So if it suddenly disappears from under you, then that's going to be a hard crash that your app is going to experience, because it's not going to be able to link those symbols to the libraries that are included with the OS, because you're just using something else. So that's the true reason Apple doesn't want you using private APIs. They just don't have the bandwidth to like make all of them super polished enough to be public. That said, I still endorse having fun with private APIs. I think it's fun. You got to do stuff that Apple doesn't let everyone do, but they clearly use in their own apps, and sometimes it's necessary, right? So it's a good skill to have if you ever need to.
Yep.
That said, there are also some past evolution proposals that we talked about that got accepted, and they have implementations along with them. So the first is the if and switch expression. So if you remember, this allows you to say like var my value equals if something, then this, else this, or to be much more complex with that and have a bunch of else ifs in there, or have an entire switch statement. Previously, you had to like wrap this in a self-executing closure, and now you don't, or you don't yet. Soon you won't have to. Because that is going to be a supported thing in the language, which is really cool. The acceptance like post on the Swift forums kind of goes into detail of which parts of the proposal are being implemented and which parts are not, which parts people brought up that don't really apply, and which parts are kind of open to future thought. And yeah, give it a read and see what's coming.
Yeah, super cool. Another one that got accepted, we talked about this, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 episodes ago, was those discarding task groups to discard the results as they're going through each iteration of the task group. Sounds like it says the proposal was received favorably, and it looks like it's been modified slightly. It's been accepted, but there were modifications that were provided during the review process in response to early review feedback. So some changes, I don't know what the changes are, but
it's like minor naming, because it wasn't originally called discarding task groups. So
cool.
Yeah.
Nice.
And yeah, it's already implemented in main, so it's coming very soon to Swift near you.
Nice.
Similarly with at UI application main, that is also going to be deprecated in favor of at main. Kind of everyone saw this coming since the templates no longer use it, and it's good to finally get rid of it to minimize confusion. And same for importing Objective-C for declarations, which will just make interfacing with Objective-C code a lot nicer. It doesn't solve all the problems, like it's not going to touch the issues with the REPL and with the debugger. Those are going to continue to be issues, but it doesn't need to like fix everything. Those are existing issues as is. So I think this is a good step forward.
Definitely. It's always good to see. I don't know. I don't follow the pulse of like the Swift evolution process nearly as much as Dimitri does, but it's cool to kind of see some of these come to light and realize that like Swift is going to be better. And there's like, I always think like, man, Swift is in a great place right now, but then something comes along and I'm like, oh yeah, that would be nice. So it's always cool to see that things can be changed and improved. And, you know, we're on Swift 5 point whatever. We've been on Swift 5 for a long time, but along the way, smaller things are getting improved, even though we're not like on Swift 6, whatever that entails. So
yeah, and the Swift blog actually like goes and lists everything when stuff does get released. So Swift 5.7, for instance, was relatively minor, but included a ton of changes. So when Swift 5.8 eventually gets released, we'll similarly have a huge list of things that we can go over. Though now, since we're kind of keeping up with it a little better, we probably won't need to go into as much detail. We'll just be able to like say, hey, this is in, go use it. It's really cool.
Yeah.
And that's exciting. On the topic of other things that are exciting, we have a bit of deprecation for the old stuff that we shared, and we have some M2 follow-up. And some of that is just errors on our part in terms of like misunderstandings. And the first one there is the Mac Mini is actually the same size. Apple just changed how they measured things. And the fine folks at Mac Stadium confirmed it's the same size. It fits exactly like the other ones fit. It's a tiny bit heavier, which they don't really care about, I don't think, because they just put these on metal racks that just don't care. And yeah, they took them apart. So if you want to see pictures of what it looks like on the inside, it's still comically a little bit empty. But yeah, pretty interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, it's interesting that they like updated the what would you call that? The dimensions. Um, to be more specific from like 1.4 inches to 1.41 inches, but they didn't like back catalog that, so it's all the same. If
Hmm.
it's the same chassis, like that would make sense to me. I get why there was so much confusion. So interesting. So kind of side note about this. This is on a Mac Stadium blog post. I didn't know that they had iMac Pros like sort of rack mounted
Uh-huh.
that you could
They
use. That's crazy, dude.
Yeah, so I think it was at an AltConf that I went to. They showed off the mounting hardware that they had for them. They had mounting hardware for MacBook Pros too.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Because yeah, where they like removed the screen and then just mounted the base
Uh,
to like a chassis that they can go ahead and put multiple. So they have a bunch of like very wacky ways of putting Macs in shelves. At the end of the day, that's what it is.
yeah.
And yeah, I think Mac Stadium would love. So I stumbled on this like on YouTube where there's this guy that and I'm probably never gonna find that link again, but there's this guy that was putting Raspberry Pis like onto a board as like a blade, and then you
Oh
could
yeah.
put these into a machine, much like you can just like slot hard drives in. And it's just a bunch of these blades. The only downside is you have to like route networking to each of them, so all of a sudden you
Uh,
need like a switch with many more ports than is capable in like a 1U kind of thing to just satisfy all this. But it's hyper compute, right? You have so many
yeah.
different computers that are all independent, all have their own memory, and you can do quite a lot of interesting things with that. So I'd say that would be the one downside if Apple released an Xserve. It would not have that the Mac Mini currently has. Like in a 5U space, you can just put 8 Mac Minis front and back, probably even more depending on like how long the chassis is. And those can all work on individual things at the same time, rather than you have a 2 Mac Mini kind of solution that fits in one
Yeah.
U. So
I wonder if they
that's
like
a benefit there.
do I wonder if they do like more virtualization or something with that, or if they would if they had sort of an Xserve. They just, give you like some gnarly high core count processor and just say like, yeah, you can split this up into 24 Mac Minis basically or something. I don't know.
Well, it'd be cheaper just to have 24
Yeah,
Mac
that's
Mini
probably true, huh?
processors that are all
Yeah.
independent, right? But it's a very
Yeah.
different thing. Like that's not easy to code for all of a sudden, because
Yeah.
it's 24 independent computers. But it's way more dense than having 24 Mac Minis, like all stacked in weird ways because there are these awkward kind of things. You can just have one power supply, and then there's just a bunch of these very tiny Mac Mini boards in a chassis. Maybe someone will do that. It'll be a very funny
That'd be cool.
experiment. But yeah, something to think about another day.
Yeah. On the topic of the Raspberry Pi blades, it's probably Jeff Geerling. I know he does a ton of stuff with like Raspberry Pis. Just subscribe to him on YouTube. He has a great YouTube channel and does a lot of really cool, a lot of Raspberry Pi stuff. He does other stuff, but a lot of it is kind of Raspberry Pi centric, and does like those blade servers or, making a 128 core kind of supercomputer out of Raspberry Pis and stuff. So
And it probably still uses less wattage than the actual like 128 core
yeah. Oh,
Xeon or
oh
whatever
no
they're
doubt.
called, AMZ,
AM-
Ryzen, Threadripper.
AMZ.
I don't know what
Yeah.
these things are called.
Yeah.
Um, what I do know is that unfortunately, the base MacBook Pros are getting half the SSD speeds. And this is something that happened to the MacBook Airs as well. And it is also happening to the Mac Minis. And yeah, it's just something you should know about. If you get the base SSD, you're going to get worse performance because instead of getting 2 chips like you did previously, 2 128 gigabyte chips, you now get one single 256 gigabyte chip. And you might be wondering, like, well, that's the same thing. Well, the only reason why there were 2 chips instead of one was for cost, because the one chip actually costs a little bit more than the combination of two cheaper ones. But also, you now have two addressable chips rather than one, which means that you can send some requests to one of them and send different requests to the other and get double the performance. That said, you no longer get that double performance on the base models, because you just start off with a single 256 gigabyte SSD chip. And that is a shame for a $2,000 starting price computer. It's less of a shame for the Mac Mini, but yeah, something to consider when you're buying these things. Go up from 256 to something higher. Well, you probably want that anyways for Xcode, but if anyone is asking you like, hey, I want to get a Mac, you seem to know a lot about Macs because you work for Apple being a programmer for Macs. So you obviously know all the things, and this is, watch out.
Yep. Big bummer.
On the topic of performance, Macworld has shared some comprehensive benchmarks of how the M2 and M2 Pro and Max compared to all the other chips. And they basically, the M2 Pro basically smokes the M1 Max in both single core and multi-core performance. So that's something that was quite surprising. Actually, it's not so surprising because the CPU for the Max was no different than the Pro. So do keep that in mind. Because the Pro and Max have the same CPU, they just differ in GPU. And was the GPU better as well? No, yes. The GPU is still worse than the M1 Max. The M2 Pro was worse than the M1 Max. Yeah.
Or sorry, yeah. So what I think is interesting is, so the M1 Ultra has two GPU configurations. It's 48 and 64 cores. The M2 Max at its 38 core GPU beats the 48 core GPU.
Yeah.
So there's like pretty significant improvements generationally from M1 to M2. Definitely in the GPU area. Let's see. Let's go. Yeah, and then the M2 Max is, let's see. So it's all using Geekbench. So the M1 Max gets 12,500 or so points. And then the M2 Pro and Max, which again are basically the same CPUs, get 15,000. So there's a pretty good jump there. But again, it's probably more to do with the extra 2 cores there. I think the more impressive thing is the GPU. What's cool is this goes from M1 Ultra all the way down to the most, like, I guess, the lowest powered currently in circulation, even A series, so Apple, like iPhone series chips and iPad, to the A14 Bionic, which multi-core, of course, the M1, the Mac sort of centric Apple Silicon beats that. But if you go to the single core, it's pretty close. Even on the iPhone, the A14 Bionic, which is, we're on A16 Bionic right now, gets about 1,600 points, whereas the M1 Ultra is 1,771. So it's pretty close. Then you go up to A16 Bionic, which is the current the iPhone 14 Pro. That's almost on par with the M2 Pro and Max CPU as far as single threaded performance. So it's pretty cool that it's really just like core count that is making the difference between what's in our computers and what's in our iPhones. It's just like sort of probably a thermal and power limit there. But they're, cramming in a lot of power into iPhones and stuff. So I thought that was kind of a cool comparison that I hadn't ever really looked into. I've always compared like Apple Silicon on the Mac to like Intel and AMD chips on the PC side, but I haven't gone from like Mac to iPhone. But the comparison is pretty cool to look at.
And iPhone to AMD chips on the PC side, which
I
think we've been doing for a long time. That's like the whole reason why we were looking forward to Apple Silicon, right? Is Apple's doing such an amazing job on their phones, and that
Yes.
is a very small battery powered device that lasts all day, compared to this big beefy machine that lasts an hour at best. And the phone was out competing that. Yes, it couldn't run that OS, but like that was the only limiting factor. And turns out they use that exact same the exact same components on those chips on the Mac chips, and therefore we get the same characteristics, right? It's basically the same Geekbench scores, but it's significantly faster than what we had like prior, just because like they're doing such a great job there. One thing I want to call out, if you need raw CPU performance, the M1 Ultra is still the way to go, because that doubles the high performance cores from 8 to 16. So that's something to consider if you need a lot of CPU and also a lot of RAM. But we'll likely get an M2 Ultra very soon, and then that'll be a very different story.
Yep.
And then last on the whole performance bandwagon, and like any follow up from the devices that we talked about last week, is one from me. Wi-Fi 6E on the M2 Max MacBook Pro is fast. I was able to, I think the highest I've ever seen was 1,700 megabits, which to set megabits per second.
Oh, you didn't. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, my bad.
Yeah, so in megabytes, that would be divide by 8, so 212 megabytes per second.
Right, that's right.
Which doesn't seem as impressive, but is a lot.
That's a lot, yeah.
Like, especially considering like gigabit Ethernet is 1,000 gigabits per second, or no, 1,000 megabits, 1 gigabit, which is about 120, I think, 125 megabytes per second. So way faster than wired Ethernet, if that is the kind of Ethernet that you're using. The only thing is that you have to have a network that supports a more than gigabit, and you have to have access points that also support Wi-Fi 6E, which and have a connection that is higher than a gigabit. Otherwise, you're never going to get these speeds. They will be impossible. Where you will see these speeds is in what's that called when you full duplex. So Wi-Fi, as you may not know, is half duplex, which means that you can spend all your time sending or all your time receiving, but you can't do both at the same time, because Wi-Fi is just limited in that way. But if you have so much headroom where you can do 1,700 in one way, that means that you can also do 800 both ways at the same time. So that does bring it closer to gigabit Ethernet as well. So even if you're limited by your network and by your access points that don't necessarily support, like they can't necessarily give you a backhaul that's like higher than gigabit, you will still get more advantage from these devices as you start upgrading your access points and stuff like that. So definitely fun to look forward to over the next few years as all of this expands. We'll probably get Wi-Fi 7 by then. I think there are like a few Wi-Fi 7 devices that are starting to creep out. The main difference between Wi-Fi 6E or Wi-Fi 6 and 6E and Wi-Fi 7 is the maximum channel width goes from 160 to 320. So you just double everything again. I think there are a bunch of other improvements on the like actual wire communication, even though there's no wire, air communication, and that like beefs it up even more from there, but it might also require more power and stuff like that. So we'll see what the like maximum throughputs of Wi-Fi 7 devices are, but with the latest and greatest, you can expect 1,700, like in the best condition, no human in between the laptop and the access point. This is like clear air, and not too many other things using the network, but that's where Wi-Fi 6E kind of benefits. You get a whole new spectrum that nothing is currently using, whereas 5 gigahertz is like hey, you can mostly use it except if you live near an airport, and they just broadcast something, and then all your devices suddenly disconnect because you're using
no.
DFU channels. So I don't think that's the case anymore. I think they kind of got kicked off of those channels because Wi-Fi was more important than airports. Like they could
Fair.
use other frequencies. Whereas everyone is kind of like moving onwards with faster and faster in-home technologies that shouldn't be disrupted by random weather reports. So yeah, things are improving, and it's only going to get better from here because we'll have faster and faster wireless stuff.
Yeah, it's cool that we're kind of reaching parity with gigabit Ethernet. Again, like talking about duplexes, we're not quite there. But yeah, like getting to that point is cool. And then I'm sure inevitably in the next few years, we'll move to maybe like 2.5 gigabit Ethernet being kind of a standard or something. And so with Wi-Fi, I'll have to catch up. But it's nice that like you don't really, if you have good like connection and line of sight and everything to the AP and everything, you don't really sacrifice too much by like jumping over to Wi-Fi as opposed to being on kind of hardwired on a device that can do that. So it's cool.
Yeah. I would say the only benefit now is the consistency of the connection, right? Sure. If you're on Wi-Fi and you move one room to the other, you might still be connected to the worst one. Whereas if you're wired, you plug in the new wire and you're back to full throttle. So that is where like wired networks are still going to win. But for the most part, I'd say wireless is the new norm, especially high throughput wireless. Like we're finally at that point where it's no longer really a compromise. If you might forget to plug in at this point and you might not need to, which is really cool, I think.
Yeah. Speaking of wireless, Apple may not be doing anything with their wireless chips that they've been working on. So they've been working on both their own like Wi-Fi cards and 5G cards as well. I know for 5G they definitely want to get away from Broadcom and just do their own thing, which
Qualcomm for 5G.
Sorry, Qualcomm. Yes, thank you. Which makes sense. So yeah, they're gonna kind of shift focus, which I think is fine, to just focusing on Apple Silicon. Kind of they're doing Apple Silicon, they're doing Wi-Fi and 5G. They're just going to kind of move over everything, kind of their focus to Apple Silicon, and make sure that, I think it kind of cited just increased performance and can't remember if it was clock speed. You might have to take over for me. Hold on. Let's see. Yeah, so it says this is one of the Apple, sort of insiders talking. Says the slowdown of processor upgrades is unfavorable to the sales of end products. Therefore, to ensure that the world's most advanced 3-nanometer processors can enter mass production smoothly, and the performance and power consumption improvements can improve, they're kind of devoting their resources over to just working on that instead of the Wi-Fi cards and 5G, which I think is fine. There are people that are making the 5G modems and Wi-Fi cards already, so no one else is doing Apple Silicon, so they kind of need to focus that. I think that's fine.
Yeah. There are some like regressions from going from the Intel Macs to the Apple Silicon Macs with regard to Wi-Fi. Like Wi-Fi did get slower when we transitioned away from the Intel MacBook Pro line. And that's just because different sets of chips were now being used. And that's probably why Apple wanted to invest more time in that specifically. One, to get away from Qualcomm, but two, to have more consistency and more control over what kind of chips and what power envelope they wanted to be available for those chips. So, yeah, we might, like, if Apple were to continue doing this, we might get faster than just 1,700, right? Because they can be more efficient with how many streams they open up to the access point. They can go ahead and double that even, because the access point still has a few radios free at that moment in time to kind of communicate with more at once. So yeah, that said, I do agree that, like you said, the 3-nanometer process is probably more important to use on Apple Silicon, especially now that everyone is kind of just saying, power be damned. Let's go as fast as possible because Apple smoked us on no power. So yeah, Intel and AM. I'm gonna say AMZ again because my brain is not giving me the right letter. But those two companies, they have made faster processors since. And yes, they consume 20 times the power, but they have regained the title of fastest CPUs on single core and stuff like that. So I think it's important for Apple to compete in that space because it sends a strong message that they're not messing around and the Mac is important to them. I'm kind of interested to see how many more processor generations are left because there's only a certain amount of like transistor shrink that you can do before there's no more shrink possible. Like atoms are only so big and you can't go smaller than that for building things based on atoms. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see like how many more of these we have left. 3 nanometers one, we're probably gonna hit 2 like half a decade later. But then I don't think there's gonna be another big one for a long time after that until we like start building entirely new technologies that are gonna replace silicon. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where things end up. Maybe we just end up with so much processing power that we don't really need more. But we're still at the point where we can use more. We can use more density. We can use more memory. We can use faster connections. And yeah, the CPU is just one piece of that. So looking forward to it.
Yep. It's kind of interesting to like, I don't know what Apple does on their processors, but like on the kind of, again, like AMD and Intel side, like how they're kind of innovating and dealing with transistor sizes, kind of either maybe the process isn't ready to go from like 7 to 5 or whatever, and they have to kind of make new ways to make the current transistor size faster or better as they like, instead of having sort of a 2-dimensional gate, they have like these 3D gates and stuff. So there's like ways of improving it, but like probably again up to a certain point, like both on the size, but also like how they kind of lay out the transistors and stuff. So yeah, we're kind of approaching that point where it's like so just ridiculously small that I don't know what they're going to do either.
Yeah. I did see some technology like a long time ago using photons instead of electrons, and the main benefit there is you don't have nearly as much heat, which means that you can 3D pack things a lot more densely. But we need to develop that technology to the point where it can catch up with the electron-based gates that we currently have. So it's going to be a long time before that kind of thing starts becoming relevant, especially since there's no real need yet to go in that direction. But you can bet that people are starting to look at it now, especially as the end is in sight for where single core can go for a given power envelope, right? Not time, but space is running out. There's only so much you can cram in a specific amount of space. So it'll be interesting to see where it ends up.
Yep.
On the topic of light reaching our processors, light might be reaching our eyes soon in the form of fancy AR goggles and glasses. And this is in the news because apparently like a year ago, Apple gave a demo and people are hearing about it now, where their fancy AR goggles / glasses allowed anyone to just make content for AR using Siri. So our friendly neighborhood assistant, which got an update, it no longer repeats what you said. It just goes boom, which I kind of like, I think. But that same assistant, it would seemingly be able to just like make stuff for you based on you telling it what you want. Like you look at a water bottle and you say, I want this water bottle in my 3D thing. And it just kind of scans it. So I think that would be really cool. Apple's clearly working on this technology. They just kind of put it out in the open in terms of like their SDKs and stuff. So it's just a matter of time before they make the other thing that you can put on your face.
Yep. Unfortunately, this article was, what do you call it, paywalled for me, so I couldn't read it. But yeah, it'd be interesting if they kind of go like, I don't know, when it says like the title is Apple devising software to help anyone build AR apps to drive headset sales. Um, do they like really mean anyone? Like it kind of does seem with the three paragraphs or 2.5 paragraphs that I can read. Um, it does say like, with software tools, Apple hopes that even people who don't know computer code could tell the
Hmm.
headset, like Dimitri said, with Siri to do something. So it almost seems like I don't want to necessarily compare it to like TikTok or like Instagram or something, but like where anyone can make content, and then there's maybe some sort of like marketplace app store type thing where there could be basic like maybe like app clip type things where it's a basic type app where it's not full featured, but anyone could host experiences like VR experiences or something. I don't know what it's going to look like, but it's an interesting move and makes sense to sort of crowdsource the development of whatever these applications are outside of the developer space to anyone and see what people's kind of creativity can come up with. That's something that I've noticed, like working on LumaFusion, is like people will use the app in ways that like we definitely didn't think of, I guess, if that makes sense. Like they'll come up with crazy transitions that like we didn't really think were possible, and people just make these crazy things with the app that we're building, but they do it in ways that are completely sort of not something that we foresaw. So I wonder if
Hmm.
that's sort of what Apple's hoping for, if that makes sense.
Yeah, as long as you give enough building blocks, right? Think of shortcuts, for instance. You give a lot of
Sure.
out of the box like abilities, and you don't necessarily dictate how those can be used, and then people will find a way to use them creatively, right? I
Hmm.
think this goes back to like the whole bicycle of the mind thing that Steve Jobs used to say a lot, where if you allow people to be creative and you give them the tools to be creative, they're going to go ahead and run with it,
Hmm.
or they're going to cycle with it, I guess. Um, and this reminds me a lot of HyperTalk, right? That was a platform, an app or application, depending on like which era you're in, that will allow you or allow anyone to build an experience for computer, right? You don't have to know Pascal. You don't have to know programming. You just have to have an idea in your head and enough tools to kind of put the building blocks together to get the result that you want. And I think having something like this for AR would be game changing. It would allow anyone to really put things together in a way that's going to make sense for them and help their individual, like, unique experience, right? We've kind of lost a lot of that as programming has become such an in depth thing, and then
Yeah.
regular computer usage has become a very consumable thing, right? You're just consuming content rather than creating content. But like you said, the more powerful apps that exist, especially on these nascent platforms, and I say nascent despite them being like 20 years old at this point. Um, I don't think the iPad and iPhone are 20 years old, but they
No,
certainly feel
not
like
quite.
they're getting there. And it's about time that we have more apps like LumaFusion that give the building blocks to do truly creative things, right? That let you step out of exactly what people intended and start building things that are unique to what you want to build.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's exciting.
It is exciting. It's very cool. Um, kind of continuing on um, the vein of this whatever headset goggle thing that Apple's working on. There's kind of a little bit more information about the way that it'll work and everything. And just to start off, and kind of this gave context, I suppose, for how all in Apple is. I mean, I know Apple has a lot of people working for them, but Bloomberg says that there is a team of more than 1,000 people that have spent the last 7 years working on this headset, which is like so much time and so many people, so many man hours dedicated to this. So seems like this is like really something that I mean, like this like wholly predates talks of the metaverse and everything. Like they've been doing this for, if this is true, a long time, way before any of that. So I think that's super cool. I mean, I guess in the context of this isn't sort of some cash grab that they think, oh yeah, we're gonna capitalize on the metaverse. It's like they think there's more of a use case than that, I suppose. So some of the cool things that it talks about is eye and hand tracking capabilities, the ability to sort of make it a VR headset, and then at your leisure, you can sort of turn off the VR and it turns into more of an AR headset so you can see the world around you. Being able to sort of select things like it has eye tracking, so if there's a button you want to press, you look at it and then there's like a finger like pinch gesture, like you tap your finger, like your index and thumb together. Yeah, I don't know. So I guess what I'm trying to say is like there's a lot of thought that seems to have gone in this. You don't have to hold something, which is cool. There will be a way to make it essentially a monitor, like extend your Mac's display to this, so you can use your mouse and keyboard and everything, but the display is sort of an AR experience. Yeah, it has an external battery pack, which I think is interesting. That'll give it about 2 hours of charge. So, yeah.
I won't
What
need
else?
my
I don't
crazy
know.
display setup anymore, right? If I have
Yeah.
an AR display that's an infinite canvas, that's all I truly care about is just having a lot of
Yes.
space to throw things.
Yeah.
And yeah, all of that becomes meaningless if you have something that is just limited by your field of view, and then you turn your head and there's more, right?
I
Um,
would love
so
that. I would love that future.
we're
That
getting there
sounds
little by
so good.
little. Um, yeah, it's definitely going to be. I wonder how much this is going to be like when the iPhone was like heavily rumored about to come out, and we had a whole bunch of mocks of like an iPod with like a number dial rotary dial. Do
Yeah,
you
yeah,
remember
yeah.
those mocks
Yeah, oh
that,
yeah.
that came out? There were all sorts that were like really really wacky. Or it was like a full touchscreen device, but you still had the click wheel as like a UI
Yes.
element. And I'm sure those came out of like early prototypes. It's like, hey, what if we did something like this? Maybe they didn't make the prototype; they just like put a design on a presentation and like showed it to people and kind of got their
Hmm.
input, and that got leaked.
Sure.
But like, how much of these AR glasses and AR goggles that we're hearing today mimic that? And that is like what I'm truly curious about, right? How much of it is just going to match our expectations when they eventually do show it off, duct tape solution on Tim Cook's head, without and like anyone drawing attention to it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that is going to be the truly exciting moment, because so many things are exciting this episode. And I like, yeah, I don't know what else to say. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah. Um, I think another cool thing is like it says it'll probably have apps like Safari, Photos, Mail, Messages, the App Store, Apple TV. Another thing that they kind of want to probably market a lot is like that it will be a dedicated video watching thing. There's a dedicated video watching feature that will allow them to have like a big screen, and I know
Maybe it'll be
that like
called Apple TV. I don't know.
Apple TV AR, TVR, if you will. I know that like the when I had very briefly an Oculus, the very first Oculus headset pre Facebook, it was there was like a movie watching thing that you could pull up YouTube and you were like in a theater, or you could change the location and stuff, which the resolution was terrible, so it looked terrible. But I'd assume on something like this, they'd probably take resolution into account and have some sort of retina spec as a standard that they would have for like if you're going to be watching videos, or especially using it as a monitor or multiple monitors, you'd have to have good enough resolution to be able to like discern text in Xcode or something. So
The
that'd
good
be
news
cool.
is
You
you only
just
have to
hit.
render what you're focusing on in high resolution, right? You can ignore
Yes,
everything else because our eyeballs are dumb.
yeah, foveated rendering, super cool. But it'd be super cool. You just hit Command R and it just like pops a little window up right in front of you. I mean that's what it does with the simulator. But I don't know. It's cool if it's on your face, I guess.
Yeah. I think we're missing the number one feature here. When you're in bed and you have an iPad or an iPhone above your head, it will never again fall on your face.
Yes, I had my phone hit my tooth and it like slightly loosened it, and I was super worried. And I went to the dentist, and he's like, "No, it's fine," but
Injured
like,
by phone.
yeah, it definitely happens. That'll be nice.
So our magic sand device is now becoming a lethal weapon towards our faces.
No face is safe.
No face is safe.
Until we just strap it to our face, you know what I mean?
Yeah, all faces will be safe.
Uh, exactly.
Uh, on the topic of things being safe, the source code to the Apple Lisa is now like safe and viewable to all because Elisa has turned 40, and the Computer History Museum, which is a very, very cool place if you're interested in like technology and you're in Northern California, like the Bay Area in general. I guess it's not the Bay, south of the Bay. I don't know. If you're in Northern California, look up the Computer History Museum and plan your trip along, like, with the ability to like go through there. It's a really cool place. And they are making all of the code for the Apple Lisa available. This is like one of the first, not the first, it's one of the first UI based computers, predating the Macintosh, but coming after the Xerox Spark, I think it was called. And I think it's cool that this allows everyone to kind of learn from it, and to view it as a historical resource, right? I think we may have reported on like the iPhone getting emulation for the first time like a month or two ago, and the Lisa has long had emulation through like Sheepsaver or whatever it's called. And this is like one step further. This is the actual code for it, including the comments, including the thought process that went behind it. So I think that's really nice that is now available as just a resource for everyone. And I kind of wish copyright in general worked this way, where like people that have a long running copyright would just make things public, but Disney ruined that for everyone. So I'm glad to see that the tech space is not following that precedent super heavily and eventually making things open.
Yeah, I think especially in the tech space, it's like, what is someone going to do with the source code to the Lisa? Like nothing. Like there's no financial benefit for like not putting that in the public domain. Like the code is well, I don't know, past its prime, I guess, or what the code was running on is past its prime. So like, there's no reason to sort of, I don't know, keep it. It's a dead platform, right? It's pre Mac OS. So I didn't really actually know much about the Lisa. This article that we'll link to is pretty cool too, because it just talks about a little bit about the history of the Lisa, and like Dimitri said, kind of Steve Jobs going to I think it was Xerox, the ones that actually made sort of the first GUI for a computer, and Steve Jobs just being like, oh yeah, this is the future. This is what computers need to be and everything. And it mentioned that the Lisa was $9,995 new. I just put that into a calculator for what that would be worth today. It's almost $30,000. You could buy a nice car for the price of a Lisa, dude.
And you'd
That's
be buying
insane.
a slow computer that had graphics, basically. This week's episode of Code Completion is brought to you by Huuungry. Huuungry, that's Hungry with 3 U's, is the iPhone, iPad, and Apple Watch app you turn to when you really want to eat, but are blinded by the multitude of choices available to you and your insatiable hunger. Huuungry isn't there to help you discover new restaurants or flavors. No, it has a much more humble purpose. You tell it all about your favorite restaurants, and it will deploy its cryptographically advanced random number generator, invoked by shaking your phone in frustration, to make the decision of what to eat for you. Stuck at home in quarantine and sick of ordering pizza? Use Huuungry. Did Huuungry just suggest pizza again? Don't fret, as options for another cuisine, a cheaper option, something closer, or simply another place are just a button away. Huuungry also comes with a collection of fun animated iMessage stickers so you can share your hunger with others. Thanks again to Huuungry for sponsoring our show. Search for Huuungry. That's Huuungry on the App Store today to give it a try. So Spencer, I've got a code completion tip for you. And I think a lot of people probably are no longer familiar with shebangs, but did you know you could use shebangs with Swift code?
I don't know what a shebang is, I don't think.
Ah, excellent. So I got to explain how ancient computers used to run. When you weren't quite a programmer, but you wanted to be a programmer, you would write a script, right?
Sure.
And a script is not something that's compiled, but anyone could just run it on the command line, like many of the other command line tools that were available. So when you run something on the command line, you type out the path to your command, and then you pass in any arguments, and it just runs, right? But if you just have a text file, you might be wondering, like, how is that going to run? It's just text, and your code would just be in that text file. And the key part there is the shebang line. The shebang line abused the fact that many programming languages used the hash symbol as a comment, and therefore that line was commented out. But it was followed by an exclamation mark, the bang, so the shebang line, followed by a space, and then you pass in the program that needs to be used to compile the text that follows. So in this case, or in a long time ago case, that would be user bin/Perl, and then the Perl code that you had would just run anytime you executed this file. Turns out that works like nowadays too with Swift files. So you can start your Swift file off with a shebang that says user/bin/Swift, and then your Swift code. And then if you were to go to the terminal and type out the path to your Swift file, that will just run as if it were a fully compiled program. Now, the usage around this is okay with Swift. Like, you can use the stuff that's pre-bundled on your OS, but if you wanted your script to include any packages, you're kind of out of luck, because it's not like you have a full package here. You just have one file that just has everything. So out to help you is Swift-sh, and this is a Swift shell extension. And it turns out the Swift command line tool is actually very useful. If you put a space and then any other keyword right afterwards, it's going to look for something named Swift dash that keyword to execute whatever you want to run. So it's a very useful like way of including extensions, and there are a bunch of extensions that are bundled with Xcode that work this way, but it also works for anything you install elsewhere. So if you install Swift-sh, that comes with a very handy ability where anytime you import a package, if you follow that package import with a comment that say says where that package is from, a GitHub username, a GitHub git link directly, and then has like a tilde arrow, I want this version, it's going to synthesize a package for you and import that package as like a dependency. So it does all that transparently for you. So you just write your script, you import whatever libraries you need, bytes, Swift Neo, whatnot, and then you have like a one file super script that the first time you run, it's going to get compiled. So it might take a little bit. But then from that point forward, it's just going to be cached, and you can just run it to do whatever you need to run. So that means you can use Swift to write scripts that can do other useful things.
That's super cool. The more you know. That's cool. The more you know. I'm trying to think of like a good use case for it, but that's cool that you could kind of, I guess, script a little bit better in Swift.
Yeah, anytime you needed to write a bash script, you can just skip that step and just write it in Swift, and that's the superpower.
Cool.
So for our mini review corner today, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, but I got new glasses, and as you can see in the YouTube video, I have very green eyes as a result of that, and I don't know what's up with the glasses there. But I really needed new glasses because it's been like, I think it was the same for you, Spencer, like years since I had a new pair, and the film that's causing this green abomination right now. That film on my old pair was like deteriorating away from sweat and like the roughness of the world over the past like 4 years. And as a result, like anytime I breathed with like a mask, it would fog, like the whole thing would fog up, but that part that was deteriorated would start condensing, so it would never go away when you like stopped breathing or like readjusted your glasses. And then I had to clean them. It was a big pain. Tons of scratches everywhere. So yeah, this is me saying, if you haven't gotten new glasses since the pandemic, they're waiting for you to be picked up at their atrocious pricing. Yes. And I am very happy that I can see clearly. I'm kind of bummed that I have these green eyes now for the YouTube version of this podcast, but it is what it is. I gotta do that, I guess.
Yeah. I just went to the optometrist last week or something. So got a new prescription in hand. I just need to use it. It'll be good. You could use dark mode on Windows and stuff. That might cut down on the glare a little bit.
Ooh, good point. I hate dark mode though, so.
Really? Oh yeah. My gosh. I 100% of the time use dark mode. It's
Oof. No, I can't. I don't endorse.
Oh, not sure if we can continue this podcast.
I like reading text, so black on white, not white on black. That's like a hard. No, I couldn't. It was the worst. So, yeah, and then you get all these reflections on your monitor because now like everything's black and everything has glossy screens, and then you start seeing everything.
I don't have a glossy screen.
Oh yeah, that probably helps tremendously.
Yeah. You're not gonna pay another $1,000 for your nano textured Pro Display XDR, my guy?
Dude, I have cats that wake me up in the morning by licking the wall. I don't know what's gonna happen if they lick the screen. and like I verified too, there's no lead paint in the walls. I don't know why. And cats can't taste sweets. So I don't know why my cat is licking the wall, but that is like one of those grating triggers that just like immediately wakes you up. And that's the cat's way of, I don't know how she learned that that's getting our attention, but it is 100% getting our attention. Just the grating sound on the wall of a wet tongue licking it. And I don't know how we got to this point, but
gross.
Yeah, no nanotextured for me.
That's fair.
I think it's immediately going to be ruined by cats. As always, I want to personally thank everyone for listening in this week. Please be sure to follow us on mastodon.social at Code Completion to know when new episodes go live, and feel free to toot at us if there's ever a topic you'd like for us to dig into. Most importantly, as a small podcast, please be sure to share this with your friends and family who are also interested in any part of the process of app development. It's your support that enables us to continue doing this, and we hope to grow a healthy community around everything we discuss. Once again, I want to give my thanks to Spencer, who is at Spencer C. Curtis. That's SpencerCurtis, for joining me this week. My name once again is Dimitri. You can find me at Dimitri Buniol. That's DimitriBouniol, and we'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Okay, I want to talk about briefly a few things. The first one, what's up with iCloud Keychain? Does this ever happen to you where you go to like GitHub and you sign in with the thing that's like saved, and then out of nowhere, it's like, do you want to save your password? And it makes you super anxious because why is it asking me to save a password that it just auto-completed? Does that happen to you?
Yeah.
Have you clicked the save password button?
No.
Okay. Just checking. I have not either. This morning, when I was prepping to send our final tweets on Twitter to tell people to go on Mastodon, I needed to log into the Code Completion Twitter account, and I had two like passwords, one older and one newer, and I was like, I don't know which one, so I clicked on one of them. That was the older one, and that didn't work, so I clicked on the password thing, ready to click the newer one or tap on the newer one, and it wasn't there anymore. It just went poof right the moment that I chose the wrong one, and I am at this point panicking because I don't know if Twitter's account recovery thing works at this point. Like, this might be the last time I gain access to this account. So I am running. I quickly turn on airplane mode on the phone. I'm running to device, iPad tainted. Only has the new one now.
Oh.
MacBook Pro tainted. Thankfully, old iPad that I'm using as my secondary monitor right here is always on Luna display. And as a result, it's like always late for like all the notifications and re-signing into Apple. It's always like delayed on all that. So I'm like, so I go on there, I check there, tainted. So I'm like, oh no, it's not on anything anymore. This iMac Pro that I'm using right now, I don't know if Intel's slow or something.
Intel, baby.
Yeah, it still had it. So I'm like, quickly, I copy the password. The moment I copy it, I notice the record changes and it's gone. So I'm like, yes, I have the password. Now I can't copy anything else. I like immediately paste it into notes, into like all sorts of different things as like a way of having it. I log in, I replace the password and everything. That has happened to me like 3 times over the past like 2 years. And like, that is not normal, right? I've lost a GitHub password through that. And that one was a panic because like, there's a whole bunch of steps to get account recovery when you have 2-factor turned on there. And yeah, that was a heart wrenching moment to kind of find a computer that was off and then turn it on without Wi-Fi, so that way I could get access back to that one. But because of that happened to me, I knew immediately, like, let's turn on airplane mode and like run to another computer to find it. But yeah, what's up with that? Why is iCloud like asking me to save passwords, and why is it saving passwords on its own? I feel like something that was working super reliably is kind of not, and that is terrifying because I have all my passwords in there.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I've had that issue. I have definitely gone on websites like where it's like, do you want to save your password? I'm like, I'm pretty sure I've already saved it, so no. It got me thinking though. I wonder if there's like, I know it's not like terribly safe, but like I wonder if there's some utility to like export and encrypt, your entire iCloud keychain.
I think you can export now. Oh, that might be an excellent idea. Yeah, because I'm using Touch ID on this old keyboard, and there's just an eject button, and I have to be reminded of what eject is useful for.
There is an export items, although it's grayed out for me even if I select something.
Export all passwords. Are you sure you want to export your passwords? Export them.
Where's that?
I'm just going to put in my downloads because that's a safe place to put all your passwords.
Absolutely.
To the hacker that's going to hack me, check my downloads folder. That's where...
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's just a CSV with all the passwords.
No. Not even like encrypted or anything?
I am instantly command optioning. So if you don't know this, command option delete key will instantly like poof it, not even to the trash. So that one's a useful one.
Nice. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Don't ever do what I just did on a computer that doesn't have encrypted disks, because that's also easily recoverable. But yeah, I might regularly back up and like save, back up to an encrypted DMG or something, and then save that somewhere, because that was like for the stupid Twitter thing that I probably don't care about, but like the GitHub one really scared me. And I don't ever want that to happen again. Oh, here's another tip for the stupid iCloud passwords. If you ever like hate typing your Apple ID password because it ended up being the longest password you own, you can make a new password entry in the iCloud passwords thing. And I named mine a.apple. And it categorizes these by like the subdomain. Not the subdomain, the main part of the domain. But it's use Apple as a top level domain, which Apple thankfully owns, so I'm never going to accidentally type this on the wrong site. But if you make one for a.apple and then you put your Apple ID credentials there, then it'll always be at the top of the list whenever you need to search for an Apple ID password to type to like autocomplete for the various like Apple TV needs you to re-sign in, or Apple Watch needs to re-sign in. That will be the first entry, and that will like be awesome. So I recommend doing that too.
Nice. I have like a not terribly long email address, but I went in. You can have like
Oh, the text replacements.
text replacements. Yeah,
Yeah,
so I
yeah,
do
I've
like
done that for long
slash
emails too.
yeah / e space, and then it puts my email in.
Yeah, I have text replacements also for all the like Command Option Shift key symbols. So mine is like star CC command star, and then that will just replace with like the command symbol. And that's super useful when like
nice.
communicating keyboard shortcuts and stuff.
That's good. Yeah. Digging through whatever the emoji menu or whatever is kind of a pain. It's not the emoji menu. It's
It now is the Unicode picker, right?
yeah.
Yeah, talking about text editing, that's the second thing I wanted to poke you about. Has Notes been like the worst on the Mac lately? So on the Mac, when you open Notes, for whatever reason, I can't like click and type. I can double click and select, but I can't just like click somewhere and start typing. It will just go where the cursor last was. I don't know if this is because I have a lot of Notes windows open. It's just broken. And it's like super janky. And I don't know if it's just me or not. The other part of Notes that I find is just broken in general is on iOS. If you double tap and then drag to select stuff, you can select and copy it, right? And then you go to another note and you're like ready to replace. So you double tap to select stuff and you're like, I want to do Command V, or I want to tap on that and do paste. You can't do that because the text view did not like start editing yet, and that's the worst. Like you can't just like replace it because it's not an editable text view yet.
Right.
And that drives me nuts every single time because when I prepare the show notes, I'm copy pasting between like two notes back and forth. So I need to realize that doesn't work and then tap to start editing and then redo the selection thing. And it's like, oh my goodness. Yeah. I don't know.
I've not.
To
be honest, the only time I use the Notes app is for code completion. Otherwise, I use IA Writer. So I don't know. I use it very sparingly.
Yeah. I think we use it the most at home because you can share notes with like others. And I just have like a shared folder with my wife, and we have everything in there. Just because it's convenient. She notes something down, I have access to it. So like for the most part, at least it's solid, right? It's not deleting stuff left and right. But like I needed to learn new tricks for editing. Like if I want to start typing somewhere, I just like double click, drag to where I want to be, arrow key, and then I can start typing there. And it's like,
and that sucks because it messes with your muscle memory.
Yeah, and then that becomes your muscle memory, which is also the worst. Yeah, totally. Okay. I don't have anything else to rant about. Thanks everyone for listening.
Bye.
Bye.